We have done a lot of work with solar irrigation, focused specifically on solar water pumping, and now we're exploring other technologies like solar fishing lights. We've done solar cooling, as Margaret indicated before, and the idea now is to also expand that product range. How our products reach customers is in various ways. So we either sell directly on cash basis, but because we're dealing mainly with smallholder farmers that do not have the financial capacity, one of the things that we have been active in is partnering with financial service providers so that we can offer credit to smallholder farmers for our technologies, or offer the smallholder farmer or the customer the option to buy from us directly. So we've done some work. We have an MOU with Standard Bank, we have with FDH, we have with National Bank Development Bank, where we're offering technologies across the country to smallholders on credit terms. Thank you.
I hope we all see how much power this panel is, right? All right, so I'll go straight into it, and I'll start with you, Emmanuel. And if I recall, in our small chat in the morning, you actually said you've worked with youths for quite a long time. And so what I wanted to understand from you is, what exactly is climate smart enterprise? So Emmanuel, how would you define a climate smart enterprise? And also, what do you think would be the most powerful solution for the youths when we talk about greenhouse?
Okay, so to me, climate smart enterprise, basically, in simple terms, this is an enterprise that makes an opportunity over the effects of climate change. We are trying to monetize. We always say that we need to take every problem as an opportunity. So climate change has come with a lot of effects, but now we should not live with them. We need to adopt. So for me, when I see like a green enterprise, that we are seeing those challenges and we are finding a way. A very good example is how our company does that. Climate change has brought a lot of weather variabilities. You cannot predict when the rain will come next. You cannot predict when the next snowstorm will come. So we develop smart greenhouse systems. So using these smart greenhouses, farmers have the power over the weather. When it's cold, you ramp up the temperature in the greenhouse. When it's hot, you cool down the greenhouses. So we are taking advantage of weather variability, but now we are commercializing it in forms of greenhouses and smart irrigation and monitoring systems. So in short, I think that's my response.
Quite smart indeed. Thank you so much for that. And Rory, so building on what Emmanuel has said, what I would like to understand from you is, what skills do you think are relevant, so be it technical or digital or business, that are very critical for young people to succeed in these climate smart ventures?
Thank you very much. I will also explain a bit from what I've experienced working in Malawi and with different young people here. We mostly work we work with young people as well as companies outside Malawi, and as Agro-Africa that is. The one thing that has been a challenge or that has been lacking in a lot of young people is speed. I would say speed and responsiveness. So the ability to do things quickly. I think in so many ventures we would, or in so many aspects of life, we would see a young person as energetic, but then we find that they're lacking that speed and energy to actually make things happen, actually start doing things and even do things. You find that you want a young person to do something and they're a little bit slow to respond. So that is one thing. If young people would gain speed, or they would understand the need for responding to things properly but also quickly, it would really be a plus for them. And also basic computer skills. Basic computer skills are very, very important in young people. I work with young people in our organization. I think if you see some interns, would find that some I'm failing to assign them a task, a basic task, maybe to input data problem. So basic literacy, even how to use a smartphone, could also be a very, very important skill that some people would lack. Simply, yeah, simple digital skills, I would say so. And also, maybe I would also add to say research, the ability to look for something. We want something to be handed to us. You see that there's a problem in the environment, in the community, there's something going wrong, and you want to do something, you don't take time to learn more about it, so you can actually play a role in it. And if you want to, sometimes we end up acting rashly without even having proper information, without asking the right questions, the right people. So maybe I'll also say research skills as well as teachability. I don't know if it's a skill. Maybe mentorship. Young people need mentorship. They need to learn how to learn. You need to learn how to learn how to ask questions, learn how to get information, learn how to use the information that has been used. So learning skills, I would say, would be very, very important in green enterprises and green development in sustainable agriculture as well.
Great, thank you so much. If there are young people in the house, but also I think for my colleagues at FAP, very great insights, and we need to take as many notes as possible. Need for speed, not the game, not the video game, but need for speed to respond to issues as quickly as possible. Research, don't wait for information to come to you. You need to do your own research and what have you. And Priscilla, you work closely with young entrepreneurs in Malawi, and you work for the UN, I think, in Malawi and abroad. And so, what makes youth uniquely positioned to innovate and of course lead in the climate smart enterprise space? And once you tackle that question, and the second one for you, and this is a question I think I really like. And also, I would like you to address the tough reality here. Why do most entrepreneurs in Malawi fail? Right? And some will fail at ideation, majority will fail at startup. What is the most practical way out of this?
Loaded questions. So, as far as why are youth ideally positioned to lead in climate-related interventions, I think for me, the response is climate is sort of coming up now, in a sense. Right, it's something that is gaining traction, a lot of traction, during, I would say, our generation, because I don't consider myself a youth. During our generation, during our parents' generation, is something where we were probably doing the things that have led to the situation that we have now. So at the moment is where we are seeing what climate change is where we are seeing what the effects of that could be. The young people now are experiencing it in real time. But more than that, if we're talking about that climate change is an issue that is here to stay, the young people that are seeing it now also happen to be the same ones that are going to be most affected. Because by the time that these effects are hitting, it's these young people that will be our age, that will be our generation, that will have the kids, that will have the job and the room to fix it. And for me, that is something that should create that sense of urgency within the young people. I will again take myself out of that group to say, as much as we have a role to play, we've already passed that. The effects of it, they're not going to affect us as directly, they'll affect our kids a lot more. While young people, you're seeing it now, and you're going to be directly affected by it. And that for me is always something that when you personalize something in that way, when it's something that affects you that directly, then you do have a choice and you have a responsibility to take part in fixing it. That is the first thing. The second thing is, while we have these challenges, young people also have the advantage that you are living through a time where you have access to technology, you have access to innovations to fix these things. And that puts you again in a very unique position that our parents did not have, that we that are coming out of that generation where we're still using the Nokia USSD phones, we did not have. And the advantage there is not only can you innovate and create solutions, but you have the opportunity to leverage what other young people are doing everywhere. Because climate change is not just an issue for Malawi, it's a global issue. And it's something that can be solved here in Malawi by copying and looking at solutions that other people are doing in other geographies, because we have access to tech, we have access to all of that innovation at the tips of our fingers. And in the same vein, there's also a lot of funding, there's a lot of opportunities that are going into actually supporting young people to come up with solutions. So for me, that is why young people are uniquely positioned, because in a sense, you are affected, but you are also the solution. And you have all of the resources in your fingertips to do that. That would be my short answer.
Great. Short but quite short. Thank you. So the second part of the question, the entrepreneurs in Malawi, like why do most of them fail? And like I said, some will fail at ideation. Like I'm one of the couples here. I have many ideas of what I can do and how I can change the world, but do nothing. And then I will get started on a few, 3-4 months, 1 year down the line, it's dead. Why is that the case, and what do you think are some of the most practical ways out of this?
I mean, you've sort of answered the question that you have asked, right? There's a saying that goes in entrepreneurship. What differentiates the successful entrepreneur versus the one that is not successful is persistence and consistency. That's literally it. It's not about the skill set, it's not about the financing, it's not about the know-how, but it is sticking with the idea and keep going even when you come to, when you meet a challenge, even when you come to blocks. That is what differentiates the entrepreneur that makes it versus the other one who doesn't. If you look at some of the most successful people in the world, they're not necessarily the smartest people. What they do is they leverage smart people around them. So it's not about them having everything that they need at their fingertips, but it's about when you come to that block, and they will come, because that is the very definition of entrepreneurship. When you come across that block, do you stay persistent? Do you keep working on that idea? Do you try to find other solutions that get you past that block? So I think that's why I'm saying that you've sort of answered the question that you asked. I would say that that is the first thing that sort of most young people do not succeed in entrepreneurship. We want easy things. You know, young people, I'll take myself out of this one as well. Young people want easy things. They want to start a business today, and then they want tomorrow to be driving a Ford Ranger 2025 model. They're renting a big office space. That's what young people want. But that's not the reality. I've been doing business since 2019. And if you see the car that I drive, if you see the house that I live in, if you see the size of my business, and most of those have been funded out of my own pocket. They are not funded out of the business, because everything that comes out of the business is going back into building the business. So if you're looking at the book of the business, if you look at the balance sheet of the business, and you look at my personal balance sheet, you think these are two different people. You think there's no way, isn't that it? You know, because I separate myself from the business. So everything that comes is not about immediately you take that and you eat it, you buy that nice Ford Ranger, you buy or you build that nice big house. But then it's about building that sustainable business that sticks over time. But all of those being said about I think it's more of a character issue on the youth that needs to be worked on. There are real structural challenges that need to be addressed as well. So one of the bigger issues that I think that young people have that do not enable them to go past the ideation stage or the startup stage is capacities. I think that is something that we do have to acknowledge. I think something we've talked about skills. So when you're setting up this business, this idea that you have, do you have the technical know-how that is required to run that business? If it's energy, are you trained in that area? If no, what most people will do is they will give up. I'm running a business in energy, but I told you before that I'm a development practitioner by training, so I'm not an engineer. What that meant is when I started, I had to upskill myself. Upskilling myself doesn't mean I have to go back to school to get a degree in energy or to become an engineer, no. But you do have to understand the basics of the business that you're working in, so that when you bring those technical people on board, they're not cheating you and they're not lying to you about what needs to happen. So first of all is the technical skills. You need to make sure that you have the technical skills yourself to run that business. If you do not, how do you leverage or how do you bring people within your team that have the right technical skills to build? That is the first issue of capacity. The second is the financial capacity. And the question was asked earlier about the type of funding that AFAP is giving. Is it grants? And if it is grants, are you requiring young people to also contribute towards that? my issue with that logic is that is the narrative that we're consistently pushing across Africa, where we are requiring startups or people that are in idea stage to contribute something to get funding, give something in return for the money that we want to give you. If I had the money, I wouldn't be coming to you asking you to give me money for my idea. If you're looking across, if you're looking at Silicon Valley, if you're looking at some of the biggest businesses, friends, family, foods, give them money to start the business. Amazon, Jeff Bezos got $300,000 from his father to start that business. No conditions, no requirements, nothing. The first round of fundraising that he did was friends. When that business was now working, that was converted to equity. We do not have those kinds of platforms that are enabling us to do that. But for me, the issue is when donors come or when funding entities come and they want to finance idea stage or startups, this requirement for people to co-finance automatically creates a barrier. Give people money, allow them to test their ideas. That is how you know the idea that works versus the one that doesn't. When it has worked, give them the financial resources and the capacities and the skills and the support to grow that idea. When they get to a stage where that business is sustainable, then you can start requiring them to contribute, whether it's for additional funding or whatever. But that barrier that we're putting for people that just have ideas to have the funding to contribute or asking them to bring something to the table, that is what limits. And for me, that's the issue, that take away those barriers. And we need to have a lot more of those type of institutions that are just giving young people money to test. Of course, we're going to have the problem where some are going to take that money and then they're just going to use it to buy nice phones, and again, the issue that I mentioned of cars. But if you pair that with incubation support, with technical support, business training, like the kind of program that Eva is talking about here, then you sort of minimize those risks. So I could go on and on and on with this issue, but I think I wanted to try and just look at those three issues. So it's the capacity, the technical and the financial, is the resilience, and the persistence issue, and the consistency. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. And she talked about skilling up, upskilling, and I feel like I'm already upskilling right now. So listening to you respond. So thank you so much, Priscilla, for that one. And friends, family, I didn't know that. Thank you. All right, Edward. So, from your perspective, and I liked your comment when Baba just finished his presentation about how broad the grain industry is. So, from your perspective, which climate challenges present the strongest business opportunities for young people and entrepreneurs right now?
Well, thank you so much. So, for me, mostly, I focus much on maybe some of the initiatives that maybe I've ever done, tested, or maybe I've had a third-party experience, or maybe having a contact with those people who have ever tried maybe a certain intervention. So, I might highlight a few challenges, because we talk of the impacts of climate change so broad, of course, but among others, based on the opportunity that maybe I can quickly see, or maybe I've seen most of the young people tapping such kind of the challenges to be an opportunity. Number one, we all understand that one of the key challenges of climate change, or maybe climate impacts, is the reduced agricultural productivity, which has directly contributed into issues of weakening the food systems. We talk of food insecurity, we talk of malnutrition, among others, especially from an aspect of agriculture. Number two, one of the challenges that comes with climate is the destruction of soil health due to the extreme weather patterns. We talk of the floods, we talk of the cyclones, among others. We talk of the loss of biodiversity. We talk of extinction of the species. We talk of the imbalance of the ecosystem as a whole. We talk of the pollution. We can have a list of the challenges that comes in as a result of climate change. But now for me, I look at the opportunities that comes in because of these kinds of challenges. Because I like the comments, I think, the two intelligent ladies that we have on this panel. Both of them, they have tackled an element of agency in young people. It's very true that I think as young people, if someone today realistically was to ask me, Edward, are young people ready to run this country? I'll honestly say no. I know that this is going to be a very big debate. We've got a lot of reasons. Number one, most of, actually the majority, you know, African, we rule by the majority, right? Yes, so the majority rules. The majority of us young people, we are not ready to start from scratch. And number two, we ask wrong questions. Actually, I don't know if maybe we know how to, that's the majority. I don't know if we know how to ask engaging questions. For instance, today, where I was asking the Tokyo Biofertilizer CEO, he said, who did you talk to for you to start this business? You get it? It's a wrong question. Because we feel like every time your colleague is progressing in life, it means you have a certain connection. Yes, networking matters, but it starts on your value that you built on. So number one, and one aspect of agriculture is to innovate new agricultural technologies. Since we know that one of the problems that we have is soil deterioration or maybe soil destruction, we talk of food insecurity as a result of climate change. Why not young people to come in with the new technologies about organic farming? Number two is about adopting agroecological farming practices. Agroecology is so broad. We talk of the organic fertilizer, it's just a component of agroecology. And number two, one of the challenges that comes in because of climate is the issue of the crop disease and the pesticides. Because, you know, when we talk of the rising temperatures, they become a conducive environment for pest multiplication and breeding. So, young people can also tap in an innovation of producing natural pesticides. Someone has come up with the drying system that we all
solar dryer.
Yes, the solar dryer. And there is Sabola inside, right? Do you know that Sabola is used to produce the pesticides that kills or maybe eliminates the active ingredients? Do you know that? It's an innovation. Whether someone did agriculture or never did agriculture, but if you can explore the technologies, you can even find it. So we can also venture into the production of the natural pesticides. And this should be technology. COVID taught us something new. Whoever knew that you can have a 20-hour, so not a 20-hour, but 5-hour complex on phone. But from nowhere, COVID-19 came in and new technologies came up. Talk of the Zoom, talk of Teams, among others. So we can talk of maybe venturing into agricultural farming practices, whereby you talk of natural pesticides and you talk of the issue of the natural pesticides production. Number two, talk of issue of waste recycling. Waste recycling is one of the big elements of circular economy, because everything that we do, it has a waste at the very end. And if there is a waste at the very end, it means that the waste that we have also causes us an opportunity. Because if you take the 2020-2025 strategic plan for the State Council, they said that one of the bigger problems that we have as a city is poor waste management. Yet, here we are, young people. Why not tapping on that? So we can get also into waste recycling. And within that waste recycling techniques, we can also create the green jobs. I run Youth Action for Success Development, which is a youth organization, and we had a project, one I think I also shared, known as a local innovation, Churches Project. So far, we've created 280 good jobs for you. 280, that's where we are combining the 160 young people that we trained in 2024 and the 120 that we trained in 2025. We have been having the intensive monitoring in terms of identifying the green skills which have yielded the results. Because some of the green skills that we provide, sometimes depending on the community, they tend to, they don't prioritize it. But for some of the innovations, especially within the context of waste management, we have urine. You know that everyone here, by the end of the day, after I think some of us, we have already produced about a liter of urine. You get the point? But that urine is already reaching the macronutrients.